What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Today we're talking about quarterbacks here in Week 4 fantasy football. Who should we start and who should we sit? And I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I like a lot of quarterbacks here in Week 4. A lot of guys with some great matchups and that potential to put up some big points. So maybe you're going to go through this video and be like, dang, I got 2 guys listed as a start. What should I do? Don't worry. We'll have quarterback rankings coming out on Friday to maybe make those decisions a little bit easier for you. But before we get into all the Week 4 matchups, how do we do in Week 3? Week 3 really could have been better in my opinion. I mean, out of the 32 quarterbacks that we gave a start or sit designation to, we got 19 of them correct for an accuracy percentage of 59%. What really hurts that percentage though? A few of the big name guys that you were probably going to start regardless of what I said, like Lamar Jackson, Matt Ryan, even Cam Newton last week, they all underperformed. They hurt a lot of fantasy teams, and they hurt this accuracy percentage 100%, but it is what it is. You got to take the good with the bad. Now, you can see a few of our hits and misses up here on the screen. Want to make sure I give a quick shout out to Mitch Trubisky for absolutely sucking to the point to where he got benched in Week 3. Thanks for nothing, Mitch. You screwed me over. But now, let's talk about Week 4 fantasy football. Get into some quarterbacks that we should start and sit. All right, Thursday Night Football, primetime matchup between the Denver Broncos and New York Jets. Yeah, I still don't really care about it no matter how many times I talk about this matchup. I'm just not overly excited. It does sound like we're going to have a new quarterback for Denver, right? Brett Rippon going to get his chance at least until Drew Lock comes back. But he's missing weapons on his side of the ball. Sam Darnold has literally nobody to throw it to. Anybody with a pulse can go play for the Jets right now. And the offenses as a whole, just not very exciting, right? Denver right now ranked 29th overall. The Jets 32nd out of only 32 teams on their offensive side of the ball. There's just not a whole lot of things going for either one of these teams. Obviously, I can't be the only one uninterested in this game as far as fantasy football goes, right? From the quarterback position, Brett Rippon, Sam Darnold, there may not be any worse options out there. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Brett Rippon has some talent. I think a lot of people are going to see some of that in flashes this week, possibly. But he just doesn't have enough weapons around him in this offense to really go out there and showcase anything. But you never know. We'll see what it is. But as far as fantasy football concerns, I'm not starting either one of these guys on Thursday night. Ravens and football team up next. And I've already started seeing questions about Jake. Should I bench Lamar Jackson? 3 weeks into the season, I'm getting these questions, and I don't see how you do it. I mean, you spent a second or a third round pick to get the guy. We said all offseason, don't draft quarterbacks early. You'll find value later. And here it is, 3 weeks into the season, you got questions, and we have a lot of quarterbacks that were taken 7 rounds later, maybe, that are outperforming him right now. It happens every year. You got the likes of a Joe Burrow, Cam Newton, even Jared Goff have more fantasy points than Lamar Jackson as of right now, but you can't give up 3 weeks into the season. We can't give up on a lot of players this early. Remember, this is a year with no preseason games. Now through 3 games, that's basically like a preseason. I expect a lot of these guys who have struggled out of the gates to start to gain momentum. So there's really no way that I can bench Lamar Jackson unless you have another top option on your bench. If you do, my question to you is, why did you spend 2 early picks on solid quarterbacks? So it really depends what you got. But no, I can't go out there and say, yeah, I'm just going to bench Lamar Jackson because the ceiling is still there. And now they get a matchup going up against the Washington football team who allow 21 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And now, no Chase Young. That's only going to make things easier. Plus, what's happened to Lamar isn't all his fault. If you've seen these games, you've realized that, there's been some key drops by the tight ends, Mark Andrews, the wide receivers struggling to get their hands on the ball. Not all of them are Lamar Jackson's fault. He's had to deal with quite a few drops, and that all plays, a part in this entire season. So don't give up on Lamar Jackson yet. The rushing upside is still there, and I have to think that he gets a little bit more on track. Are we going to see what we saw last year? That's hard to replicate, right? We can't assume we're going to get the same numbers again. Now, on the Washington side of things, do we need to spend any time here? Really? It's Dwayne Haskins. He's already starting to kind of argue with teammates during practice. It just doesn't look good right now. The passing offense is anemic. He's big play dependent to Terry McLaurin. Outside of that, really not involving a whole lot of people. The running game is hit and miss. Not going to even think about Dwayne Haskins here this week. But Lamar Jackson, don't give up on him just yet. Steelers and Titans sound like it's going to happen, right? The game may be postponed a day or two. It may happen Monday or Tuesday, but those stats should count for your Week 4 matchup. Just make sure you check with your league on their settings for a situation like this, just so you know for sure, but it sounds like the matchup is going to happen. And it sounds like Ryan Tannehill is going to be without A.J. Brown again, which kind of worries me a little bit. Now, I don't hate Ryan Tannehill at all. I think this just really limits his touchdown upside. It doesn't give him that opportunity for those big plays maybe as often. Still plenty of weapons, still the ability to go out there and rack up some yardage, just doesn't give him that high touchdown ceiling to really give him that over-the-top number that you're looking for on a weekly basis. That's what worries me. This week, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, averaging right about 18 fantasy points a game to opposing quarterbacks, but they have allowed 2 passing touchdowns each of the first 3 weeks. Like I said, Tannehill isn't a bad start. He's probably a safe floor guy, but the ceiling just isn't there this week, and that's what kind of worries me. If you're looking to play it safe, he's not bad. Personally, I have him in the sit column. As for Big Ben, right now he's averaging right around 20 fantasy points per game, and Tennessee gives up 20 fantasy points per game. Where this week kind of benefits Big Ben is it gives him another day, maybe 2, to get Deontay Johnson cleared and back. If Deontay Johnson is back, it only helps the potential upside for Big Ben. Now, he kind of has that floor of 250 yards and 2 touchdowns on a weekly basis. And with Deontay Johnson coming back, possibly, that really makes that a little bit more of a reality. I still like Big Ben, and I'll throw him into the start column here in week 4. Chargers and Bucks, and everyone wants to talk about Joe Burrow and how much he throws the football. What about Justin Herbert? I mean, this guy's got 82 pass attempts in his first 2 ever NFL starts also, and he also has back-to-back 300-yard games. Now, he faces off against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who allow only 14 fantasy points per game, one of the best in the NFL. But 2 of those games were against Teddy Bridgewater and Jeff Driscoll, so kind of take those numbers with a grain of salt. I expect Justin Herbert to continue to throw the ball. Sounds like no Mike Williams, which means more Keenan Allen, more Austin Eckler, and we absolutely love that when it comes to all things fantasy football. I don't mind starting Justin Herbert here in week 4. As for Tom Brady, going to be without Chris Godwin, kind of like he was in week 2. In week 2, Mike Evans led the team in targets with 10. However, last week, we saw Gronk get a little bit more. He had 7 targets last week, the most he's had by far this entire season. If they can continue to get Gronk involved, that's going to make it a little bit easier for Tom Brady because let's be realistic, it's never a good thing when you lose a wide receiver like Chris Godwin. Now the Chargers are going to be without Chris Harris in their secondary and Melvin Ingram there from the linebacking spot. So it's definitely something that benefits Tom Brady, and I don't mind starting him this week. They're going to continue to throw the ball. The running game, what's going on with the running game? Is it Fournette? Is it Rojo? Is it neither at this point? One thing we do know, Brady's going to be there to throw the football, and I'll start him here in week 4. Seahawks and Dolphins, and you got Russell Wilson out here on pace for about 5,000 yards passing, 75 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Oh, and about 480 rushing yards also, if anybody wants to know that. I mean, the guy is absolutely killing it this year, on pace to be the NFL MVP in my opinion. He's averaging 34 fantasy points per game, and now he goes up against the Miami Dolphins, who give up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. You got DK Metcalf. You got Tyler Lockett looking basically unstoppable at this point. Hopefully Russ pulled DK aside, smacked him in the back of the head, and told him to never slow down before the goal line ever again. Now, there's a chance that Chris Carson, he could be slightly limited. If that's the case, do they throw the ball even more this week? There's no way you can sit Russell Wilson. He's an obvious must start. What about Fitzmagic, though? He kind of found his swag in week 3, right? We kind of saw Fitzmagic from years past last week. He was having fun. He's now gone 67 pass attempts without an interception, which is great for him. It looks like Seattle could be without Jamal Williams, so that only helps. And plus, Seattle has been great to play against if you're a quarterback. They've allowed 30 fantasy points per game, 2nd most in the NFL. However, yes, they have played the likes of Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, and Dak Prescott. So some pretty good quarterbacks have put up some good numbers, but I'm not putting it past Fitzmagic to go out there and have to throw the ball all game again to try to keep pace with this offense of the Seattle Seahawks. I don't mind Fitzmagic. Got him as a start here in week 4. Vikings and Texans, and it sounds like this game should be good to go. We've had no positive tests come up for the Minnesota Vikings, so that's a good thing. What's bad, though, is now I have to figure out what to do with Kirk Cousins. I can't seem to figure out Kirk Cousins to save my life. He's either an all-pro or whatever Brock Osweiler was. Because, I mean, that's how bad he looked a couple weeks ago. Now, all of a sudden, they utilized Justin Jefferson a little bit more, which I absolutely love, and he looks a lot better. So it really depends where this offense continues to go. Houston gives up right around 19 fantasy points per game, so not a bad matchup. If they continue to utilize Jefferson, I think it really helps Kirk Cousins and makes him safer. But until I see that happening in this offense, it's hard for me to trust him. As of right now, with the floor being so low and the ceiling not being astronomical, I would prefer to just sit him and wait till they kind of figure out this offense going forward. As for Deshaun Watson, finally, right? As a Deshaun Watson owner, you're glad that he finally made it past the matchups of Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not the easiest of matchups going up against Minnesota. They're currently 10th against opposing quarterbacks, giving up right around 18 fantasy points per game. But Deshaun Watson's weapons are healthy, and this is a better matchup than he's had the past couple weeks. Obviously, now he's going back into your lineup if he ever left it, and he's going to remain in the start column here week 4. Saints and Lions, and Michael Thomas is back at practice, which is great to see. He's limited still, but is there a chance that he plays here in week 4? I really don't think so. I don't think that happens. I don't think they rush him back this fast, but Drew Brees needs it, right? Because as of right now, Alvin Kamara is the only weapon he's utilizing, and I guess he could check down to him 15 times a game. I mean, all of us Kamara owners would absolutely love that, but if you look at all the stats over the past couple weeks without Michael Thomas, there hasn't been another receiver or tight end to get more than 5 targets in a game outside of Alvin Kamara. That's a problem. They really need to spread that ball around to give Drew Brees that higher ceiling. Right now, he's got a fairly safe floor. To say Drew Brees is going to go out there and get right around 18 points, pretty fair assumption. To go out there and say Drew Brees is going to get 30 without Michael Thomas, we're reliant on some big plays on a weekly basis. So he's a safer floor. I don't mind starting him this week in a matchup going up against the Lions, who give up, on average, right around 22.5 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. But Jeff Okudah didn't look half bad in the Detroit Lions secondary last week, so make sure you pay attention to him also. As for Stafford, now he gets a full week of practice with Kenny G, right? Last week we were kind of on the fence. Was Golladay going to play? He ended up playing, scoring a touchdown. Now he gets his big play threat back, which only helps open up things for the likes of Marvin Jones, maybe even Danny Amendola, maybe some TJ Hawkinson, and that really raises the ceiling for Matthew Stafford in a game going up against the Saints, who allow 23 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I don't mind starting Matthew Stafford whatsoever once again here in week 4. Browns and Cowboys, and we have Baker Mayfield, the game manager now. That's right. I mean, we knew this was going to be a run-heavy team all offseason, right? And we're starting to see that every single week now here this season. But Baker Mayfield's only had 23 pass attempts each of his past 2 games. He's not playing bad at all. He's just not being relied upon, which is kind of good because it's really limiting the amount of mistakes that he can make, right? Now, going up against Dallas, they give up on average 25.5 fantasy points per game, but don't forget, they just got Russell Wilson not that long ago. But, Baker Mayfield, more of a quarterback 2 now. I mean, he's not one of those guys with that super high ceiling going out there throwing the ball 40 times a game. The ceiling isn't there. The floor, somewhat safe, right around 15 points or so. Just not going to be one of those guys that goes out there and helps you win. He's going to make sure you don't lose possibly, but he's just not going to go out there and win you many matchups, and that's why I'm going to keep him here in the sit column. For Dak, it's another good situation for him this week, right? I mean, going up against Cleveland, who allows right around 21.5 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Harder to run on Cleveland than it is to throw on Cleveland. Plus, does it matter? I mean, Dak's thrown for over 450 yards his last 2 games. Plenty of weapons with Lamb, Cooper. We saw a Michael Gallup signing in week 3, which is absolutely great. Plus, he still has that rushing upside that we see all the time. I still love Dak Prescott, and as high as he is so far this year, he better not be anywhere but your starting lineup. Jags and Bengals, and man, did Gardner Minshew hurt me last week. I was all on board the Gardner Minshew train. I mean, I was like, toot toot, and everything. I mean, and he absolutely came out and didn't do hardly anything. I mean, damn, it was the Dolphins, Gardner. He still threw for 275, but no touchdowns, 1 interception. Yeah, he didn't have DJ Chark, which he should have him back this week. Now they're going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, who give up on average right around 16.5 fantasy points per game, which is 8th best in the NFL. But we know Joe Burrow likes to go out there and gunsling, right? They're going to throw the ball a lot in Cincinnati. Why? Because they hate everybody who owns Joe Mixon. That's why. Could we be in for a little bit of a Gardner Minshew, Joe Burrow, showdown? Possibly. But in my opinion, there's just safer options this week. And I'm going to have to sit Gardner Minshew here in week 4. For Burrow, dude just keeps slinging balls everywhere. I mean, all over the field. Nothing but balls over here and balls over there. I mean, back-to-back games with 300 yards, 5 touchdowns to no interceptions in his last 2 games. And we know they're not going to run the ball, right? We mentioned that they're going to throw the ball almost 50 times a game, and they have plenty of options to throw it to. We're starting to see a little bit more T. Higgins now, which is great. He's got options all over the field. And with Joe Burrow there under center, we know he's going to throw the ball. I like me some Joe Burrow this week. He may actually almost crack my top 10. I'm going to start Joe Burrow here in week 4. Colts and Bears, and this is a matchup between two teams who really limit opposing quarterbacks, right? You got the number 1 defense of the Indianapolis Colts, who allow only 10.7 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, going up against the Chicago Bears, who are number 2 against quarterbacks, allowing only 12.8 fantasy points per game. I mean, Rivers has been somewhat underwhelming, right? Only 3 touchdowns on the season through 3 games. The team really wins in Indianapolis with their running game and their defense. So for Rivers, he just, it's just not something where he's fantasy viable as of right now. The floor is too low. The ceiling isn't high enough. We're going to avoid Phillip Rivers. But what about Nick Foles? I mean, he came in and looked pretty good last week, but he was going against the Falcons. But he went 16 for 29, 188 yards, and 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. But like I said, going against the Falcons, I mean, the defense is what it is there in Atlanta, but now they've had a week to prep for Nick Foles, has the Indianapolis Colts. They know what they're getting themselves into here this week. They have plenty of tape on Nick Foles. Plus, I'm not putting anything past this defense in Indianapolis. They are on the verge of being arguably one of, if not the best defense in football. I know, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, they all have a say in things. I get it. However, the Colts are being disrespected on the defensive side of the football, and I really don't want any part of it this week. Nick Foles has that potential, right? We saw him go out there and light it up with Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller, even Jimmy Graham. But this week, I'm passing on Nick Foles. Going to put him in the sit column until he can get a little bit better of a matchup here going forward. Cardinals and Panthers, and when Kyler Murray throws interceptions, it's not enjoyable to watch. I mean, he didn't play great in week 3, but he didn't kill your fantasy team by any means. It was a disappointment, though, for a lot of people. Now he gets a matchup going up against Carolina, who is actually 3rd in the NFL against opposing quarterbacks, giving up only 13 fantasy points per game. But they faced Derek Carr, they faced Justin Herbert, and they faced Tom Brady without Chris Godwin. So those numbers could be a little bit higher. However, they are an underrated defense in the secondary. But the ceiling of Kyler Murray is game-winning on a weekly basis. Last week was considered possibly a down game for Kyler Murray, and he still scored 24 points. So you're not going to sit Kyler Murray. As for Teddy Bridgewater, he's not playing bad either. Kind of similar to what we talked about a little bit earlier with just the lack of touchdowns, kind of like a Ryan Tannehill. That's kind of what we're seeing right now from Teddy Bridgewater. Same type of thing with maybe even a Phillip Rivers, right? Not playing bad, not turning the ball over a whole lot, just not getting the opportunity for a lot of touchdowns. He only has 2 passing touchdowns through the first 3 weeks of the season. More of a game manager, more of, dink and dunk down the field. That's why a lot of DJ Moore owners are disappointed right now. The big plays are really the only times he has that opportunity for those touchdowns. Just a low ceiling, and it's just not high enough to start, in my opinion. Don't hate Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's actually playing a lot better than a lot of people expected. Just can't start him for fantasy football. Giants and Rams, and we're going to talk about Daniel Jones for a second because this is a guy who went out week 1, threw for 279 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then he comes out in week 3 and throws for 179 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 interception to the beat-up defense of the San Francisco 49ers. And now he has to worry about Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey this week. I mean, the guy hasn't thrown a touchdown now in 2 straight weeks, and he doesn't have a run game that can take the pressure off of the passing game, right? We're not sold on the likes of a Dion Lewis, a Wayne Gallman, a Devonta Freeman. The offensive line, way below average at this point. Saquon struggled behind this offensive line. We can't just assume these guys that were behind him on the depth chart are going to come in and light the world on fire. Daniel Jones, as of right now, is somebody I just cannot trust. If you haven't thrown a touchdown in 2 weeks, you're not going in my lineup. You're staying in the sit column. For Goff, we can't ignore Jared Goff anymore. I know a lot of people want to ignore Jared Goff. I know he looks like he's on the sideline. He just ate a box of Crayolas. I mean, he could definitely be related to Eli Manning in some shape or form. However, his play has not been bad whatsoever. Over the last 2 games, 588 passing yards, 5 touchdowns to only 1 interception. And he did that against Philadelphia and Buffalo. So not easy competition to say the least. Now he gets a matchup against the New York Football Giants, who give up on average right around 18 fantasy points per game. You got Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and now Darrell Henderson in the backfield, who looks great, and they're playing well. He's currently quarterback 9 in fantasy football, and I got to throw him into the start column here this week against the Giants. Bills and Raiders, and Josh Allen has cemented himself as maybe the most improved quarterback here going into 2020. The guy is playing absolutely great. He hasn't thrown for less than 311 yards in a game so far. He's got 10 touchdowns to only 1 interception. He still shows that rushing upside from time to time, and now to make things better, he's going up against the Raiders, who are going to be without Damon Arnett and John Abram. I mean, this only gets better and better for Josh Allen. Do not be surprised if Josh Allen is super high in my quarterback rankings this week. I absolutely love him here. And this entire offense of the Buffalo Bills is something that's going to be a fantasy asset for a lot of people here for quite some time. Love Josh Allen. For Derek Carr, I kind of feel bad for him, right? I mean, no Bryan Edwards. Sounds like there's a chance that there's no Henry Ruggs either, which means a whole lot of Jacobs and Waller, which is great, but that just limits the upside and the ceiling of Derek Carr. He just doesn't have enough healthy weapons on a consistent basis to go out there and put up those great fantasy numbers. He's a very underrated quarterback. He just needs more weapons to actually give him that ability to go out there and put up some decent numbers. So as of right now, Derek Carr not going against the Buffalo Bills, even though I think the Bills can go out and get an early lead, forcing, Las Vegas to have to throw more. I just don't think the ceiling is there because the playmakers aren't there on the offense. Patriots and Chiefs, and as well as Patrick Mahomes has been playing, I think this is the week we're going to have to sit him. I'm just kidding. I'm just making sure you're not falling asleep at your desk at work. Just making sure you're paying attention over there because we're never, ever, ever sitting Patrick Mahomes at the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now, averaging 300 yards and 3 touchdowns a game, no interceptions on the season. He's basically matchup proof at this point. For Cam Newton, he really hasn't had to throw the ball very much, right? Outside of week 2 against Russell Wilson, it's been all running for New England, for Cam and the backs in that backfield. Well, this week, he's going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. Going up against the Chiefs offense, which we saw looked absolutely great this past week, the New England Patriots are going to have to throw the ball if they want to have a chance at winning this ball game. I'm looking for Cam to step up those passing numbers, which gives him that higher ceiling. Absolutely love Cam Newton this week for week 4 also. Eagles and 49ers, is there a chance that we see Jimmy G come back here this week for the San Francisco 49ers? That's possible. Sounds like we could be getting back George Kittle also, but it's not an ideal matchup going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. They allow right around 19 fantasy points per game. I currently have Jimmy G listed as a sit, but that's really only because there's a lot of better options out there this week. I don't hate Jimmy G if he is back under center here this week with George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Jerick McKinnon if he's good to go. I mean, Debo, he's clear to return to practice. Does he play? But he's returned to practice, which is, very promising. This could be an offense that has been, killed with injuries that could turn it around here fairly quick in the very near future. Plus, I love the offensive play calling of Kyle Shanahan. He really puts his players in a position to excel, and that's exactly what we're looking for in fantasy football. Like I said, I don't hate Jimmy G this week, or maybe if it's Nick Mullins. Either one of them, I don't hate it this week. I think there's just safer options. That's why I have them listed as a sit. As for Carson Wentz, I mean, this dude can't catch a break, right? It doesn't matter who it is. He's going to lose weapons on a weekly basis. Now, no Dallas Goedert. One of his, top tight end options not going to be on the field. His offensive line, they're banged up with Jason Peters and Lane Johnson. The matchup isn't horrible going up against San Francisco, right? Because the defense is just so banged up, but the ceiling just isn't there. He's having to rely on Greg Ward and Zach Ertz. Maybe Zach Ertz is the problem. Maybe Zach Ertz is out there just like, with a voodoo doll or something. I mean, he just wants more target. I don't know what it is, but they can't keep people healthy in Philadelphia, and that really, really hurts the ceiling of Carson Wentz. If this guy could keep consistently healthy weapons, at his expense, he could put up some huge, huge numbers, but he just can't keep them healthy, and with these limited options, I gotta list him as a sit here in week 4. Monday Night Football, Falcons and Packers, and this game could easily see 100 pass attempts. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. On one side, you got Aaron Rodgers averaging right around 280 yards and 3 touchdowns a game. Plus, he hasn't thrown an interception, and maybe he even gets Devontae Adams back this week. Plus, he's got a matchup with the Falcons, who allow over 34 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Right now, Aaron Rodgers currently quarterback 6 in fantasy football, and I'm looking for another big game. I have him as my Manscaped start of the week, and don't forget, as soon as this video is over, head over to manscaped.com, use our promo code HEADLINERS, all caps at checkout, and receive 20% off your purchase, plus free shipping. There are sponsors here on the year. Make sure you go show them some love as soon as this video is over. Now, what about Matt Ryan? A lot of the same can be said for Matt Ryan, right? The difference is His weapons, are they healthy? Does he get back Julio Jones? Is Russell Gage on the field? That's another question mark we have here for week 4. If they both miss time, that makes this start of Matt Ryan a little bit more risky, so make sure you follow the injury reports here throughout the week leading up to the weekend. Atlanta has shown that they're going to throw the ball a lot, right? They've thrown the ball 129 times in 3 games, and they've also trying to play to avoid an 0-4 start. This is almost a must-win game for the Atlanta Falcons. If the studs play, look for Matt Ryan to have a huge game. If the studs sit, he's more of a safer floor play with a limited ceiling here in week 4. All right, so those are my starts and sits for week 4 fantasy football for the quarterback position. As you can see, I like a lot of guys this week. There's a lot of great matchup, a lot of potential high-scoring games for some of these quarterbacks here in week 4 fantasy football. So I understand that you may have a couple good options on your team. Just a reminder, at the end of the week, we'll release our quarterback rankings to help you make those difficult decisions. But we greatly appreciate your support over there. If you're looking for anything fantasy football, you're just looking to have fun for 15, 20, 30 minutes a day, you found the right channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We greatly appreciate you. Hopefully you guys had a great week and looking forward to another great weekend. We'll talk to you later.